I stared at my reflection in the mirror of our Boston penthouse, the city lights twinkling behind me like distant stars. My hands trembled slightly as I applied my lipstick, the expensive kind that Richard always said was wasting his hard-earned money. 15 years of marriage, and somehow I had become nothing more than a line item in his budget. The door slammed downstairs. Richard was home early from his investment firm. I could tell by the heaviness of his footsteps that today had been rough on the market. I braced myself. "Catherine, where are you?" His voice echoed through our 4,000-square-foot home, a home I had designed, decorated, and maintained to perfection. "Upstairs, getting ready for the charity gala," I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. I heard ice clinking in a glass before he appeared in the doorway of our master bathroom, leaning against the frame with that smirk that had once charmed me but now made my stomach tighten. "Another event? Don't you ever get tired of spending my money on dresses you'll wear once?" Richard loosened his Hermes tie, his wedding band catching the light as he did so. "It's for the Children's Hospital Foundation," I replied softly. "You're on the board, remember?" He waved his hand dismissively. Yes, another chance for you to parade around in front of my colleagues while contributing absolutely nothing of value." The words stung, as they always did. I turned to face him directly. "I organized the entire event, Richard. I secured the venue, the catering, the silent auction items. Playing with my checkbook isn't work, Catherine," he interrupted. "It's shopping. The only difference is you call it organizing instead of spending." I felt my chest tighten. 15 years of this. 15 years of diminishing everything I did. When we first met at Harvard, he'd admired my business degree, my ambition. Then slowly, after marriage, he'd convinced me to give up my career to support his. Now, at 42, I was just Richard Montgomery's wife who lived off his money. "I put my career on hold for you," I reminded him quietly. He laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the marble tiles. "That little marketing job? Please. Let's be honest about what you gave up and what you gained. You live in a penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor. You drive a Mercedes. You have a closet full of designer clothes." He gestured to the bathroom around us. "You take hour-long baths in a tub that cost more than your first car, all because of my work, my money." I looked down at my hands, at the large diamond ring that felt more like a brand than a symbol of love. "I'm not ungrateful, Richard. I just wish..." "You wish what?" "That I appreciated your hard work planning parties and lunches." He drained his scotch. "When you start contributing something real to this marriage besides spending my money, then we can talk about appreciation." I closed my eyes briefly, gathering strength. "We should leave soon. The gala starts at 7. "I've decided not to go," Richard said casually, as if he hadn't just pulled the rug out from under me after weeks of planning. "Something's come up with the Hamilton merger. I need to review some documents tonight. But I'm being honored for raising over $1 million for the pediatric oncology wing," I said, disbelief coloring my voice. He shrugged. "They're honoring my checkbook, Catherine. Let's not pretend otherwise." As he walked away, I caught sight of my reflection again. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, poised, perfectly dressed, and completely hollow. That night at the gala, standing alone while accepting an award for philanthropic excellence, I made a decision. This would be the last time Richard Montgomery made me feel worthless. The next morning, I called an old classmate from Harvard, now one of Boston's most formidable divorce attorneys. What Richard didn't know was that I had been doing more than playing with his checkbook all these years. Much more. As I waited in the reception area of Chen Legal Partners, I thought back to the early days of our marriage. Richard had been different then, ambitious but kind, driven but respectful. Or perhaps I had simply been too blinded by love to see the warning signs. I remembered the day he first suggested I quit my marketing director position at one of Boston's top firms. "You don't need to work those long hours," he'd said. "I make more than enough for both of us. You can focus on building our home, our social connections. Those things are valuable too." It had seemed reasonable at the time, even considerate. I hadn't realized I was being slowly edged out of my own independence. Mrs. Montgomery, Amanda will see you now. The receptionist's voice pulled me from my thoughts. As I walked through the door into Amanda Chen's office, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. The end of a 15-year marriage shouldn't feel like liberation, but it did. Catherine Montgomery, Amanda smiled warmly as she rose from behind her desk. Harvard Business School, class of 2009. You haven't changed a bit. I returned her smile. That's kind of you to say, but we both know 15 years changes everyone. Amanda gestured to the chair opposite her desk. What can I help you with today? Your email was rather vague. I sat down, smoothing my skirt with hands that weren't quite steady. I need a divorce attorney, and I need the best. I see. Amanda's expression shifted to professional concern. I'm sorry to hear that. May I ask what prompted this decision? 15 years of being told I contribute nothing to our marriage except the ability to spend my husband's money effectively, I replied, my voice surprisingly calm. 15 years of having my intelligence, my efforts, and my worth systematically devalued. I've reached my breaking point. Amanda nodded, picking up a pen. I understand. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state. We'll need to catalog all marital assets for a fair division. Can you tell me about your financial situation? I took a deep breath. That's where things get interesting. I opened my purse and removed a USB drive, placing it carefully on her desk. 3 years into our marriage, Richard started a tech company called Nexus Innovations. He was busy with his investment firm and needed someone to handle the boring administrative details, as he put it. He asked me to run the company's day-to-day operations while he provided the initial capital. Amanda raised an eyebrow. And you agreed? I did more than agree. I threw myself into it completely. I handled incorporation, negotiated office leases, hired the initial development team, worked with legal to protect the intellectual property. I even helped refine the business model using my marketing background. I leaned forward slightly. Richard thought he was giving me a little project to keep me busy, something more meaningful than planning charity galas and dinner parties. I'm beginning to see where this is going, Amanda said, her eyes brightening with professional interest. I nodded. For tax purposes and because he saw it as his money anyway, Richard listed me as co-founder with 51% ownership. He never took my role seriously. It was just paperwork to him. He completely forgot about the ownership structure as the years passed. And what is Nexus Innovations worth today? Amanda asked, though I could tell she'd already guessed this was significant. The last valuation put it at approximately $380 million, I said quietly. It's developed into one of the leading financial software providers in the country. Richard's investment firm handles their financials, but legally, I own the controlling interest. Amanda leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing at her lips. Catherine, do you have documentation of all this? The ownership structure, your involvement. I tapped the USB drive. Everything, every email, every contract, every document showing my substantive role in building the company from the ground up. Richard may have provided the seed money, but I grew it into what it is today, all while he continued to tell me I was contributing nothing of value to our partnership. This changes the entire dynamic of your divorce proceedings, Amanda said. You're not just entitled to an equitable share of marital assets. You own a controlling interest in a major company that your husband apparently doesn't even realize is legally more yours than his. I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I don't want to destroy Richard. I just want him to understand that I haven't been living off his money all these years. I've been building something valuable while he was busy demeaning my contributions. When did you last discuss the company with him? Amanda asked. He mentions it occasionally when the quarterly reports come in, always referring to it as his company or his investment. He has no idea I've been attending virtual board meetings for years, reviewing major decisions and signing off on executive hires, all while he thinks I'm just planning luncheons or shopping. Over the next few months, I continued my normal routine. I maintained our social calendar, ran our household, and organized the charity events that Richard so casually dismissed, all while meeting with Amanda to prepare our case. The night before our first mediation session, Richard came home jubilant. The Hamilton merger had finally closed. "We should celebrate," he announced, opening a bottle of champagne. "Though I suppose you've already planned how to spend this bonus." I accepted the flute with a smile. "Actually, I've been thinking about the future quite a bit lately." "Oh?" He seemed genuinely surprised that I might have thoughts beyond my next shopping trip. "And what profound insights has that produced?" I took a sip of champagne before answering. "I think it's time for a change, Richard." "A change?" Richard's eyebrows rose as he loosened his tie. "Don't tell me you want to redecorate again. The last renovation cost me nearly $500,000. I set my champagne flute down carefully on the marble countertop. "Not that kind of change. I've scheduled a mediation session for tomorrow at 10 a.m. I've filed for divorce." The glass in Richard's hand froze halfway to his lips. For a moment, the only sound in our kitchen was the gentle hum of the refrigerator. "You've what?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "Filed for divorce," I repeated evenly. "Amanda Chen will be representing me." Amanda Chen. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Your friend from Harvard, the divorce attorney." He laughed suddenly, though there was no humor in it. "Catherine, be serious. What would you possibly do without me? Without my support, my money?" The condescension in his voice, so familiar after 15 years, no longer had the power to wound me. "I suppose we'll find out," I replied calmly. Richard's face darkened. "This is absurd. What's your game here? Are you trying to scare me? Get me to apologize for something?" "No games, Richard. Just a recognition that this marriage hasn't been working for a very long time." He set his glass down with enough force that champagne sloshed over the rim. "And what exactly do you think you're entitled to? Half my assets? You think you've earned that by attending parties and redecorating our home?" I met his gaze steadily. "I think 15 years of partnership entitles me to an equitable division of our marital assets under Massachusetts law." "Partnership?" He spat the word like it tasted foul. "What exactly have you contributed to this partnership besides spending my money?" "I guess we'll discuss that tomorrow at mediation," I said, turning to leave the kitchen. 10 a.m. at Amanda's office. I'll text you the address." "Catherine!" His voice stopped me at the doorway. "If you walk away now, don't expect me to be generous. I built everything we have, everything. Without me, you have nothing." I looked back at him, at the man I had once loved enough to give up my career for. "You know, Richard, that's exactly what I used to think too." The next morning, I arrived at Amanda's office 30 minutes early, dressed in a simple but elegant navy suit that projected both confidence and professionalism. Amanda met me in the conference room, reviewing our strategy one final time. "Remember," she said, "stay calm regardless of what he says. Let him underestimate you. It's worked to your advantage for years, after all." At precisely 10 a.m., Richard strode in with his attorney, Thomas Bradford, one of Boston's most aggressive divorce lawyers. Richard looked impeccable, as always, in his tailored suit, but the dark circles under his eyes suggested a sleepless night. "Let's get this over with," he said curtly, taking a seat across from me. "I have actual work to do today." Amanda smiled pleasantly. "Of course. We appreciate you making time for this, Mr. Montgomery. Shall we begin with an overview of the marital assets?" Bradford nodded, opening a leather portfolio. "My client is prepared to offer a very generous settlement given the circumstances." He slid a document across the table. "Mrs. Montgomery will retain the vacation home in Cape Cod, her vehicle, her personal belongings including all jewelry, and a one-time payment of $3 million. Amanda glanced at the document without touching it. "And may I ask what Mr. Bradford means by 'given the circumstances'?" Bradford exchanged a look with Richard before responding. "Mrs. Montgomery entered the marriage with minimal assets and has not been employed during the 15-year union. Mr. Montgomery has been the sole financial provider, $3 million is more than generous. I see, Amanda said, her tone conversational. And what about Nexus Innovations? How are we addressing ownership of that asset? The change in the room was immediate. Richard stiffened, while Bradford looked momentarily confused. Nexus is my company, Richard said flatly. It's not up for discussion. Amanda opened a folder of her own. Actually, Mr. Montgomery, according to these incorporation documents, Nexus Innovations lists Catherine Montgomery as co-founder with 51% ownership. These documents were filed 13 years ago with your signature clearly visible on page 4. She slid the papers across to Bradford, who began reviewing them with increasing concern. That was just paperwork, Richard snapped, a tax strategy. Catherine had nothing to do with building that company. Is that so? Amanda continued, her voice pleasant but firm. We have extensive documentation showing Mrs. Montgomery's substantial involvement in Nexus from its inception. Emails detailing her hiring decisions, office lease negotiations, business strategy consultations, and regular participation in board meetings for over a decade. The color slowly drained from Richard's face as Amanda continued presenting evidence of my involvement in Nexus, emails, meeting minutes, signed contracts, photographs of me at company events. This is ridiculous, he finally interrupted. She may have handled some administrative tasks, but I provided the capital, the vision. The capital, yes, Amanda acknowledged. Approximately $800,000 in initial investment, which has now grown to a company valued at $380 million under Mrs. Montgomery's majority ownership and active participation. Bradford leaned over to whisper urgently in Richard's ear. Richard's eyes narrowed as he listened, then widened in disbelief. You can't possibly be suggesting that Catherine owns Nexus, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. That's my company. I founded it. I funded it. Co-founded, Amanda corrected gently. And while you provided the initial capital, Mrs. Montgomery provided years of uncompensated work building the company to what it is today, all while being told repeatedly that she contributed nothing of value to your partnership. Richard turned to me, his expression a mixture of betrayal and dawning horror. You knew about this all along. You've been planning this. I've known I was majority owner since you set up the company that way, I replied calmly. But I only started planning when I realized you would never recognize or respect my contributions to Nexus or to our marriage. Bradford requested a brief recess, practically dragging Richard from the room. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see them engaged in intense conversation, Richard's face flushing red as Bradford appeared to be explaining the severity of their situation. They're realizing they have no leverage, Amanda murmured. Legally, you own the controlling interest in Nexus. That's not debatable. When they returned, Richard's demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the arrogant dismissiveness, replaced by a careful, calculating expression I recognized from his business negotiations. I think we need to reconsider our approach, Bradford began smoothly. Mr. Montgomery recognizes Mrs. Montgomery's contributions to Nexus and is prepared to offer a more substantial settlement reflecting that involvement. Amanda smiled. We're not interested in a settlement that simply acknowledges Mrs. Montgomery's involvement. We're stating plainly that she owns 51% of a $380 million company. That's not negotiable. It's already established fact. Richard finally looked directly at me. Why are you doing this, Catherine? To punish me? To humiliate me? No, Richard, I said quietly. I'm doing this because for 15 years, you've told me I contribute nothing except the ability to spend your money. I'm simply correcting the record. The mediation lasted for hours, eventually extending to multiple sessions over the following weeks. Richard cycled through anger, disbelief, bargaining, and finally grudging acceptance. The final divorce agreement recognized my majority ownership of Nexus Innovations while allowing Richard to maintain his role at the company, provided he acknowledged my contributions and consulted me on major decisions. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment overlooking the Charles River. It was smaller than our penthouse, but somehow felt more spacious without the weight of Richard's constant belittlement. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Richard. "Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Finance wants to discuss the Baker acquisition. Will you be calling in?" I typed back, "I'll be there in person." The next morning, I walked into Nexus Innovations headquarters for the first time as its publicly acknowledged majority owner. Heads turned as I made my way to the conference room where the board was gathering. Richard was already there, along with the executive team. He stood as I entered, an awkward gesture somewhere between old habit and new respect. "Catherine, thank you for coming in person." I took my seat at the head of the table, his former seat. "Good morning, everyone. Shall we begin?" As the CFO began his presentation, I caught Richard watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps it was regret for what he'd lost, or perhaps it was simply the shock of finally seeing me as I truly was. Not just someone who lived off his money, but a woman who had built something valuable while he wasn't paying attention. Either way, it no longer mattered. For the first time in 15 years, I was being valued for my contributions, my intelligence, my worth. And no one, especially not Richard Montgomery, would ever make me feel worthless again. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the phrase Richard had repeated so often during our marriage, "You just live off my money." The irony wasn't lost on me that his dismissive attitude had ultimately cost him control of his most valuable asset. Sometimes the most expensive lesson is learning to value what you already have before it's gone. Richard had learned that lesson too late. But I had learned something far more valuable, that my worth wasn't defined by his perception and never had been. The setting sun cast a golden glow across the Boston skyline as I pulled into my parking space. This new chapter of my life wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was simply about truth, the truth that had been there all along, waiting to be acknowledged, and that, as it turned out, was worth far more than all of Richard's money combined.